screencastify that I will post on this lesson at the end of the lesson itself. So what I'd like you to do is to go to the classroom and open up assignment 5.12, Trois types de verbes. Now that assignment should look like this. I'm filling out a copy so you all have your own. So please open it up if you can. Now, if you would prefer to write down notes by hand, you may do that. If you'd like to print this out, that's not a bad idea, although I know that a significant portion of the class does not have access to a printer, unfortunately, and I just was not planned enough to send out copies to you guys or distribute them to you in any way. So what I want to do is to go through 3 different types of verbs. Now, if you think about my classroom, if you remember back to when we were in school and we were in a classroom in room B208, on the back wall, there was a whole wall full of verb conjugations and charts. That wall, I told you guys, is what you would learn by the end of French 1, more or less. There are a couple verbs maybe we won't quite get to, but that's fine. For the most part, we were going to get to that. Now, given distance learning, I am going to introduce these verbs to you guys. I assume that you will come back to them next year in French 2 and learn them more fully. Anything you get now is great. Anything that you need to relearn later, that's part of the process of learning. Learning, forgetting, and relearning. Especially when it comes to verbs. That's something that if you've not studied another language previously, it's a little bit difficult to get your head around this concept. So please be patient with yourself, and I'll be patient with you, and it'll all be good. So let's start with the 3 types of verbs. The 3 types of verbs are RE verbs, IR verbs, and IR-ISS verbs. To be honest, what all these come down to is that in the singular forms, they sound exactly the same each time, and in the plural forms, you have a consonant sound and you add the appropriate ending. I'll explain this in a moment. More or less, there are patterns that you can basically figure out, and these all follow one of those 2 major patterns. The first pattern is the ER verbs that we went over, like manger, commencer, jouer, regarder, etc. And these are the second type. So how does this work? Now, in each of these, we start with our stem. So the vent is our stem. Oops, the D. Attend is the stem. And then we have our ending, the RE. For the dormir and servir, dorm is our stem. Serve is our stem.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you're not presenting your screen.
You know what? That is an interesting point. Let me present my screen. Thank you, Michael. The Screencastify video has my screen on it. Oh well. Okay, does everybody see my screen? I'll assume that the answer is yes. Okay, good. For the finir, choisir, fin and choise are our stems. Now, the way this works is this. You want to say je vends, tu vends, ils vont. Oh, by the way, we need to know what these mean. I forgot that. Vendre, to sell. It's like a vending machine, right? Attendre, to wait, not to attend. Be careful. It's a false cognate. Dormir, to sleep. Important action. Servir, to serve. It's fairly obvious. It's a cognate. Finir, to finish. And choisir, to choose. Now, to get back to how these go. I sell, je vends. You sell, tu vends. He sells, ils vont. These gray boxes, by the way, down here are meant for the sound. So, vend. I'm just going to kind of type these in phonetically, more or less. Vend, vend. We sell, nous vendons. You sell, vous vendez. They sell, ils vendent. Now, how does this work out? Nous vendons. And make the capital D there to show that there's a consonant sound there. Vous vendez. Ils vendent. Okay. Now, how are these spelled along these lines? Je vends. Tu vends. Ils vont. Notice we have a silent ending here in each case which is the S. Je vends, tu vends, and then no ending, ils vont. Over here, nous vendons, vous vendez, ils vendent. Our endings, as always, ONS, EZ, and a silent ENT. Voila. Does everybody understand how that goes at a basic level? Okay, hearing no questions, hearing no chats, I'm going to move on. I'll come back to attendre later on. In fact, probably what I'll do is simply go through these first three, stop the Screencastify presentation, then go through the other three if you all would like, and then start you on the assignment. Our next set of verbs is a regular simple type of IR verb, dormir. Now these do a funny thing. For these verbs, I'm going to put it here. Je dors, tu dors, il dort. We have the same sound, but this funny thing happens where that M just kind of disappears. Or in servir, the V just kind of disappears. Nous dormons, vous dormez, ils dorment. The M comes back in the plural forms. Now how do these go? Je dors, tu dors, il dort. Notice the SST pattern. Now, if you compare that to the vendre, right, we've got the two silent S's. The thing that's a little bit different is this silent T. We don't have a silent T with ils vont. What we do have is the nasal vowel en, and that D is part of the nasal vowel, so it's silent, right? Here, nous dormons, vous dormez, ils dorment. And once again, with our endings, the ONS, EZ, ENT, silent ENT, those are all fairly simple and straightforward. Does that all make sense? Hearing nothing, I'll move on. Okay, our last type of verb here is the IR-ISS verb. Now, to be honest with you all, RE verbs, there's a handful of them in the French language. The simple IR verbs, there's a handful. The IR-ISS are much more frequent in the French language. And often what happens is we'll take an adjective and make it into an IR verb, and the verb means to become that adjective. So, par exemple, rougir. Rouge is red. Rougir, to become red or to blush. Vieillir. Vieil means old. Vieillir, to get old. Grandir. Grand means big. Grandir, to get big, etc. So what we do here is this. We're going to take these verbs and we've got je finis, tu finis, il finit. Fini, fini, fini. Voila. We need to add in that consonant sound for the plurals, and it's going to be a S sound. Nous finissons, vous finissez, ils finissent. The spelling is where things get a little bit complicated. In the singular, it's not too bad. Je finis, tu finis, il finit. And notice we've got the S, and the T. Once again, that SST pattern, that's the other spelling pattern aside from the ER endings that we have for verbs in French. Now, when it comes to the plurals, nous finissons, vous finissez, ils finissent. In order to get the right sound, we have to change our spelling quite a bit. Now, we've got the ONS here, and the EZ, and the silent ENT. What has to be added into each one of these is the ISS, and that's why we call them IR-ISS verbs. That is how you conjugate each of these three types of verbs. And in a moment here, I'm going to go through the others, and then I'm going to put the finished product of this sheet up as a PDF on the same assignment. I'm going to stop there at this moment.